Everyone remembers the madness of Blazing Saddles, the outrageous jokes, the chaos that seemed to push comedy further than it had ever gone before. But hidden inside all that noise was something few noticed at first, a quiet presence that gave the film its soul. That presence was Gene Wilder. He wasn't even supposed to be there. The role of the Waco Kid had already been cast, and production was underway. Then, in a single day, everything fell apart. An actor collapsed, the crew panicked, and Mel Brooks made a desperate call. Wilder answered without hesitation, boarding a plane without even asking what the part was. It wasn't a career calculation. It was a leap of loyalty, a gamble that would change film history. And when he arrived, Wilder didn't fight to stand out. Instead, he chose to do the opposite. In a movie full of shouting and slapstick, he brought stillness. In a story bursting with parody, he carried sadness. His quiet delivery and haunted eyes turned a last-minute replacement into the emotional anchor of a classic. What secret did Gene Wilder hide in plain sight? And how did silence become the loudest part of Blazing Saddles? Before Gene Wilder ever became the quiet force of Blazing Saddles, his journey began in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, under a very different name, Jerome Silberman. Born in 1933 to a family of Russian Jewish immigrants, Gene's earliest memories were not of laughter, but of fear. When his mother fell gravely ill with rheumatic heart disease, doctors gave the young boy a strange order. Don't ever make her angry. Make her laugh instead. From that moment on, humor became less of a pastime and more of a survival instinct. By the time he was a teenager, Wilder was obsessed with performance. He begged his mother to send him to study acting, and eventually found his way to the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School in England. There, he learned discipline, control, and the subtlety of stagecraft. Unlike many young performers chasing applause, Wilder was drawn to quiet intensity. He studied under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, absorbing the emotional honesty of method acting. Those lessons, about restraint, about truth, about finding depth in silence, would shape every role that came after. Before Hollywood ever knew his name, he was already crafting the art of saying more by saying less. No one could have guessed that these lessons from childhood and early training would one day transform a chaotic Western spoof into one of the most enduring comedies of all time. When Blazing Saddles went into production, no one imagined Gene Wilder would become its emotional core. The role of the Waco Kid was already secured by Gig Young, a polished Academy Award winner. On paper, Young was perfect, a man of stature and experience, someone who could lend gravitas to a drunken gunslinger. But reality unraveled in front of the cameras. On the very first day, Young shook uncontrollably, drenched in sweat, unable to deliver his lines. Hours later, he collapsed. The crew was stunned. What had looked like method acting was, in truth, the brutal grip of alcohol withdrawal. In that moment of chaos, director Mel Brooks turned to the one person he trusted completely. He picked up the phone and called Gene Wilder. Wilder didn't ask for a script, a salary, or even details of the role. He simply said yes. By the next morning, he was on set, stepping into a part that might have doomed the entire film if left unfilled. What followed was nothing short of remarkable. With only hours to prepare, Wilder slipped seamlessly into the Waco Kid's skin. Surrounded by over-the-top gags and outrageous energy, he chose not to compete. Instead, he grounded the madness. His calm eyes, weary voice, and stillness gave the satire weight. A last-minute replacement had become the film's anchor, proof that sometimes the greatest performances are born in crisis. What made Gene Wilder's turn in Blazing Saddles unforgettable wasn't just timing. It was the choice he made before ever stepping in front of the camera. Wilder insisted on one condition: he would not play the Waco Kid for laughs. In a film packed with slapstick and absurdity, that demand sounded risky. But Wilder knew that comedy without contrast can collapse under its own noise. His vision was simple. If everyone else shouted, he would whisper. On set, this meant lowering his voice until audiences leaned in, keeping his movements minimal, and letting silence hang longer than expected. When the Waco Kid confesses in the jailhouse that he lost his nerve, Wilder didn't throw the line away as a gag. He delivered it with the weight of a man haunted by the past. That heaviness didn't drown the humor. It made the humor stronger. The chaos around him suddenly had meaning because he treated it as real. Behind the scenes, Wilder's calm extended beyond acting. He offered quiet guidance to younger cast members, shifting a line's emphasis, suggesting a pause. He never sought credit, but many would later say he was the unofficial director of tone. In the middle of wild comedy, Wilder chose truth, and in doing so, he revealed a deeper secret. Sometimes the funniest moments come from the saddest souls. Behind the laughter of Blazing Saddles lay struggles that never reached the screen. Richard Pryor, one of the sharpest comedic voices of his generation, was deeply tied to the film from the beginning. He co-wrote some of its boldest lines, injecting razor-edged truth into the satire. Originally, Pryor was Brooks's choice to play Sheriff Bart, and the idea of pairing him with Gene Wilder seemed destined to ignite history. Their chemistry would later prove electric in Silver Streak and Stir Crazy, but here the chance slipped away. Studio executives at Warner Brothers were nervous. Pryor's public battles with drugs and his unpredictable reputation made them balk. Against Brooks' wishes, they blocked his casting. Cleavon Little, dignified and charismatic, took the role and carried it with grace. Yet Wilder always wondered, what if Pryor had been across from him in those scenes? The quiet sorrow of the Waco Kid, paired with Pryor's fiery wit, might have transformed the film even further. At the same time, the studio's anxiety extended beyond casting. They pressured Brooks to soften the racial satire, to strip away the sharp edges that made the comedy bite. Wilder, though only an actor on paper, quietly urged Brooks to resist. He understood that the film's power lay in its honesty. Without that edge, Blazing Saddles would risk becoming just another farce. Instead, it stood as a daring critique, thanks in part to Wilder's quiet defense behind the scenes. In the middle of the outrageous chaos that defined Blazing Saddles, Gene Wilder carved out something hauntingly human. His Waco Kid wasn't just a drunk ex-gunslinger played for laughs. He was a man broken by life, haunted by memories of faster days and darker nights. When he sat in that jail cell, slouched against the bars, telling Bart how his hand once trembled and ended his reign as the fastest draw in the West, Wilder didn't smile. He spoke with a weight that silenced the room. It wasn't a punchline, it was a confession. Audiences laughed at his dry wit, but beneath the laughter was recognition. The kid's sorrow felt real, and it mirrored Wilder's own quiet intensity as a man. He wasn't trying to win a laugh every second. He was reminding us that pain often hides behind humor. Mel Brooks would later admit that this emotional gravity kept the film from spinning into pure absurdity. Wilder gave it a heart. Even in his silences, he spoke volumes. A glance downward, a pause before delivering a line, the slight tremor of his voice. These choices carried more weight than a dozen exaggerated gags. In a film filled with chaos, Gene Wilder proved that stillness could be revolutionary. His performance didn't just support the comedy, it gave it a soul. What audiences saw of Gene Wilder in Blazing Saddles was unforgettable, but what they didn't see may be just as telling. Crew members recalled how many takes were ruined, not because Wilder stumbled, but because everyone else did. His calm, deadpan delivery caught them off guard. Cameramen shook with laughter, sound operators muffled their own reactions, and even Cleveland Little struggled to keep a straight face. Some of Wilder's richest moments were lost to uncontrollable laughter or left behind in the editing room, including glimpses into the Waco Kid's broken past that hinted at even deeper wounds. Yet Wilder's true legacy from Blazing Saddles wasn't only on the screen. Between takes, in the middle of the mayhem, he casually mentioned an idea to Mel Brooks. What if the grandson of Dr. Frankenstein wanted nothing to do with the family name? At first, Brooks brushed it off, but Wilder couldn't let it go. He drafted pages on his own, and soon, that spark became Young Frankenstein, one of the greatest comedy parodies ever made. It's here that Wilder's genius becomes clear. He wasn't just an actor saving a troubled production. He was a guardian of tone, a hidden guide for his peers, and a creator whose quiet suggestion would birth another classic. From the wreckage of one film's chaos, he planted the seed of another masterpiece. Looking back, it's astonishing to realize how much of Blazing Saddles rested on Gene Wilder's shoulders, though he never asked for the spotlight. He was called in as a replacement, but he left as the soul of the film. Through restraint instead of exaggeration, through sadness instead of spectacle, Wilder showed that comedy could carry truth. His Waco Kid reminded us that even in laughter, there are scars we cannot see. Behind the jokes and chaos, Wilder stood quietly beside Mel Brooks, urging him not to dilute the satire, not to compromise its edge. He knew that true comedy isn't safe. It challenges, it unsettles, it dares to speak the uncomfortable. In this way, Wilder wasn't just performing, he was protecting the film's integrity. And beyond that, he was creating, using stolen moments on set to imagine Young Frankenstein, a legacy that proved his mind was as brilliant as his performance. Gene Wilder's secret was never about being louder, funnier, or flashier. It was about understanding that stillness can speak louder than shouting, and honesty can outlast spectacle. His legacy whispers to us still. Sometimes the quietest voice carries the deepest truth. What about Gene Wilder's journey speaks to you the most? Share your thoughts below and help keep his light alive by passing his story on. And if you want more hidden stories from Hollywood's golden past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for the next untold chapter.